just a summary of what he was discussing. He starts with his first UFO encounter at Warner Robins Air Force Base, working radar. He had a team working radar tower, and they were running missions against SAC, is what he said, Strategic Air Command, basically to see if they could pick up whatever types of aircraft and things they were running. And they picked up these UFOs. It was the 3 of them that were hovering. And so he goes into that story in much more detail. And he even explains the Eglin Air Force Base, his dealings there. And I believe that was the climatic hangar, the world's largest climatic hangar at the time, back in as early as the early 50s when he was working there. And that's when he was introduced to Benoit Mandelbrot and these other very highly classified types of projects. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of the beginning. I did my best to kind of do splices of what he was saying with kind of a narrative of what he shows within his book itself, all the topics that he covers, because there is a big correlation and link between what he talked about in that video to what's in his book. So I did my best to kind of, and with your help, of course, we tried to splice this together. And what happened was I actually interviewed with Laura Eisenhower last year after we had met her in 2019 at one of those conferences. Then I was able to stay in touch with her. She said, "Hey, why don't you come on? I'll interview you and you talk about your grandfather." So I took that interview of me with Laura. So it's me with Laura at the beginning. She's introducing myself and who my grandfather is, and then it splices into our grandfather talking. And sharing that video from the 90s. And so it's kind of interesting how we try to make the story play out with this kind of narrative, and then even splice in the Disclosure Project video and footage with some of his testimony. And you can see that he's aged a little bit. I think he had his first mini stroke by the time he did the video for Disclosure Project. So you see he can't speak quite as well. You can see him start to decline in even in a physical state, and maybe just his motor skills and speaking and everything else. So that's what we had to kind of deal with as he was starting to come out with more information. He wasn't so healthy. He wasn't as sharp as he was back when obviously he had all this information that he could have shared. But right when he started to talk about it was when he started to decline. And there's also maybe these, I don't know, even during the time of the Disclosure Project, when he went to DC, even Dan Willis said this. He said that perhaps, he was targeted at that time. And that was the reason why when he went up on podium to speak, he just completely froze. He got very excited, agitated. It seemed like just scared, just like kind of had this shrill and just couldn't speak. And they just had to take him off, escort him off. So, and there's something to that. Maybe there's a reason why this all happened at the same as he's becoming more open with this knowledge and getting out to the public, then he slowly declines. So anyway, that's kind of like the gist of how.
There was also a lot of pressure on him, with the information that he's coming forward with, because a lot of people in that community who had come forward before had been, taken out and things like that. The government did not want certain things to be discussed. So I think he probably felt a little bit of that as well, just a little bit of fear of this disclosure. And it's probably a pretty monumental moment for sure. And Dan Willis even described that, it was very, they felt a lot of pressure at the time going through that. Yeah.
Definitely. I would hope we could still get that raw footage from that time in press club hearing that wasn't shown. I feel like there is more there. Dr. Greer, I remember meeting him and him saying, "Oh, it's all available on the website." And I'm like, well, there's got to be more unedited footage and versions, even of what our grandfather said back then, those tapes that he did for the Disclosure Project. So anyway, there's a lot more to find out. And it's what I try to tie in from the Disclosure Project, from the actual video DVDs that are available by Dr. Greer. Some of that testimony was so amazing, especially Clifford Stone. And as Dan Willis said, he was the one that had really mind-blowing testimony about these, I think, at maybe 50 some types of extraterrestrial races that they already categorized, that the governments, certain agencies already categorized these as, if they crash, this is what they look like, this is what to do, what not to do, how to really interact and recover these ships.
They had so much information on the various different types. They've done it so many times. They have different protocols to follow on how to handle different species and everything. So it was pretty elaborate. That was pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very amazing to hear that testimony. And so our grandfather kind of followed into that line of what he had to share, that type of secrecy. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to speak at the time in DC in 2001. So here we are, exactly 21 years later. I mean, this happened in May 9th or May 10th, something around that time in 2001. So now we're 21 years later, and finally we're getting more of this information out. And actually our dad just sent us some link because he still follows like the New York Post and all that stuff, the mainstream. So it's interesting, we get him giving us little things, whatever UFO stuff comes out. And they just said that I think they're finally going to have an open hearing after 50, 70, however many years, open hearing on the UFO subject of the topic itself. So there's these little drips that are finally going to happen within the mainstream, the official story, the narrative that they want to spin or say, oh, yeah, we've been working on some top secret stuff. And like the TR-3B, I think is what Dr. Michael Salla was saying was going to be the next thing to come out, the actual type of aircraft. And they're going to say that it's ours. Of course, we didn't reverse engineer it. We were just smart enough to build it over these years. That's why we're like 50, 75, however many years behind of where we should be, because they want to slowly drip this information out and be like, oh, we didn't get any help. We were smart enough to come out on our own.
Yeah.
And so
they'll leak some of the information out that they want to, but it'll come with a narrative that they want us to believe as well. So definitely take that with a grain of salt. A lot of discretion on what we're hearing.
Right. And then when people slowly get used to that idea, then they'll finally say, okay, well, now we see this interaction with these other races. And then we'll play out that story, however that's supposed to go.
Yeah, oh, wow. Finally, we were making this contact when, meanwhile, it's been happening since the 1930s, actually. Yeah.
When I got out in 1989, we had cataloged 57 different species. You have individuals that look very much like you and myself that could walk among us and you wouldn't even notice the difference, except for some of the things that they might be able to go ahead, even in a dark room, and touch an object and go ahead and identify what color that object might be. They would have a heightened sense of smell, sight, hearing. The situation is that you have various types of what we normally call grays. We didn't call them grays in the military, but you had at least 3 types of the grays. You had some that were much taller than we were. The unique thing that I'd like to point out for the most part is that the entities that we did catalog were in fact humanoid. Now this created a situation where the scientific community was trying to figure out why that would be the case, because you would expect that if life evolved on other planets, that they would take on some type of other being, so to speak, not necessarily look humanoid or be bipedal such as we are. But apparently, we got quite a few of the species out there that are humanoid in appearance, and that creates a question that yet has to be answered by science.